Welcome to the Block Podcast, the show for crypto natives. Every week, we do short but in-depth conversations with the most important builders and investors in crypto, so you can filter through what's noise and stay ahead of the markets. I'm your host, Jason Choi. Nothing on this show should be construed as financial advice, and my guests, myself, and my employer may hold positions in assets discussed on the show. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Crypto.com. Stick around to learn more. Now, in episode 134, if you've been following the show, we had Nick Tomeno, who is an early Coinbase employee and the partner at 1confirmation, the crypto venture fund, on to discuss and debate NFT investing. Now, as you know, while I'm excited about NFTs as a concept and open to the idea of investing in marketplaces that allow NFT trading, I've been a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to investing in NFTs, and I always thought that it's a little bit more than just gambling. And after that discussion that I had with Nick, I decided to spend more time playing around with different platforms and reading more thought pieces on the topic written by credible people such as Chris Dixon from A16Z, and I came away with some more nuanced contentions and confusions. So this week, I'm very stoked to have my friend, who also happens to be a colleague of Nick from last episode, Richard Chen, another partner at 1confirmation. Now, Richard is an experienced NFT investor, and he spotted a lot of early opportunities such as Super Rare, the now popular NFT art marketplace. And he also told me a lot about DeFi very early on. So we talk about things such as whether NFT market curation can truly be decentralized, or are we just creating new rent seekers, and whether memes are an investable strategy, as well as an actionable step-by-step framework for people who really want to take the plunge into NFTs. So I'm really grateful for Richard for taking the time to hop on the show, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. Well, Richard, I'm super excited to finally have you on the show because, we've spoken for a few years now, and I've always wanted to pick your brain on the show, on the record. So welcome.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here finally.
Yeah, and just to give our listeners some context, I recently had your partner from 1confirmation, Nick, on the show to talk about NFTs and address some of my skepticisms. And you probably know that I've been a little bit of a skeptic for a long time. I've pestered you with so many questions in private. And truthfully, you were actually one of the first people to urge me into taking NFTs more seriously. The other being, I think, Jake from Coin Fund, who was also on the show. So I'll be amiss if I didn't have you on to continue that conversation. So before we dive in, can you give our listeners a sense of, who you are and what you do and what is your interest in NFTs?
Sure. So I'm a partner at 1confirmation. 1confirmation is a crypto venture fund. So the fund started in 2017, back when most funds at the time were hedge funds and kind of focused on trading and short-term price predictions. But we wanted to take a more long-term approach to investing in projects that are going to be foundational projects in 5 to 10 years. So we were one of the first venture structured funds. And since then I've raised 2 funds. I guess with NFTs specifically, we've been quite active in this space really since the beginning of NFTs. So in 2018, we invested in OpenSea, which, back then, NFTs started in 2018 and OpenSea was was and still is the largest marketplace for NFTs by far. And in 2020, invested in Super Rare right when crypto art was starting to see exponential growth. And we also just invested in a new project called Webiverse, which is building a virtual world for NFTs and those sorts of assets. And we've also invested in individual blue chip NFTs as well.
That's really interesting, and I definitely want to dive into how you were able to see those opportunities early on. But just to kind of set the stage here, because not long before we started recording this, I think Blau, which is an EDM artist, for those not aware, they recently did a $10 million drop. So can you help explain just what exactly happened there, and why are people so excited about that?
Sure. So Blau did a drop on his website, partnered with Origin Protocol, where he was selling NFT vinyls, limited edition, I think 33. And there were different tiers. There was a platinum, gold, silver tiers where each would unlock certain features. So the highest tier, the platinum tier, which is only one person, you could get a custom song created by Blau for you, and you get access to all of the different unreleased music across all the different vinyls. So it's interesting because back in the old days before the internet, like in the 90s, when you wanted to buy music, you like literally had to go to a store and like buy a CD or vinyl. And then iTunes, Spotify, the internet like completely changed the business model for the music industry. And then now with NFTs, you can actually prove scarcity of these like digital assets, and actually sell the individual asset themselves. So it's kind of like going full circle back to the era where artists, musicians were selling individual pieces.
Yeah, we definitely got to dive into that in a bit. But just to kind of contextualize the whole discussion, NFTs is such a broad term. And I think in my recent episode with Nick, which I believe was episode 130, 134, we talked about kind of different types of NFTs. And there's digital collectible, digital art. So for you personally, how do you, what is your mental framework for NFTs, right? There's so many different types. How do you categorize them today?
Yeah, sure. There's like several big buckets I would put NFTs into. So one is digital art, which is kind of self-explanatory. Then there's collectibles, so that would be like crypto kitties, crypto punks, things of that nature. Then there's the virtual world NFTs, so that would be like Decentraland, Somnium Space, like where you can buy land and parcels in those virtual worlds and also like build stuff on top of them. Then there's like the IP NFTs. So that will be kind of like ENS, NBA Top Shots. Well, Top Shots, I guess, also counts under collectibles. But yeah, those are the main categories of NFTs. I would like how I would bucket them.
And in terms of the time spent or the capital deployed, is there a specific category that you're most excited or bullish on, or is it pretty much a generalized NFT thesis?
It's a generalized NFT thesis. I specifically spend most of my time on crypto art just because that's like the subsector of NFTs I understand the best. And I also built cryptoart.io website to track crypto art industry data and sales.
Got it. And you guys are probably one of the very few funds, or at least the very first funds that really invested in NFTs, and not just in the infrastructure, as you mentioned, but in the individual pieces of NFTs too. So, just to kind of kick off the discussion here, because personally, I've always struggled with the idea of investing in these pieces of NFTs. And in this previous discussion with your partner, Nick, he brought up the point that most of these digital collectibles and digital art, they really accrue value based on memes. So while I understand that also makes it very hard for me to build kind of any serious investment framework around this. So I'm very curious about, what was the process behind building enough conviction around what memes you think would take off in the long term? Or perhaps there's something more than memes. Maybe you disagree with Nick a little bit there.
Yeah, I think probably a better term than memes is investing in culture. So investing in NFTs is like very similar to, invest like in the traditional world where you're part of a talent agency like CAA and you have to find up and coming actors, artists, fashion designers who like people don't know right now but are going to be huge like household names in like 10 to 20 years. Um, so there's a couple ways of doing that. One is like you can do like the safe way, which is to already invest in the blue chip stuff, like the artists that already have a brand name. And if you look at like art investing historically, it's kind of like a rich gets richer industry. It's very
Mm.
similar to venture capital actually, where like the blue chip stuff are like expensive because like those are the things that are going to get even more valuable in the future. Like for example, buying Coinbase stock at the Series E, which was 8 billion, like was a good investment because like now it's valued 100 billion on private markets. So like investing in blue chip stuff is one approach, which is what we did. The other more risky approach, but more upside approach, is to be a tastemaker and find these undervalued artists that you think are going to become really big. And there's a lot of NFT art collectors that have like a really good track record of finding such people, and also like making a lot from those investments. For a fund, for ourselves, we're not professional art collectors, so that's not really our focus for the fund. Although I know I try to do it personally, but for the fund, we're just backing blue chip stuff.
Got it. So I guess it has more in common with investing in art and music and films than say investing in DeFi or investing in traditional venture companies, right?
For sure, yeah. Because with companies, like you're looking at like revenue growth and cash flows, user growth, things like that. Whereas for art and like culture, the metrics are, I guess, less tangible um, in that sense.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of my skepticism, or well, I should probably say confusion here, because I'm a little bit of a kind of investing nerd, and I really love this idea about margin of safety. So I want to know what is at least roughly the fair value of an asset, and that helps me make decisions such as if there's a 50% market crash tomorrow, should I be buying more of this asset or should I be really selling all of it? Whereas for DeFi projects, there are cash flows that I can kind of benchmark that valuation to. For some of these more quote unquote meme assets like an NFT, say I have a fraction of an NFT and it suddenly crashed like 50% in price tomorrow, I have no basis to decide, should I buy more of this? Should I sell it? So I'm curious about how you think about the valuation of these individual NFT pieces. Not so much the marketplaces, because there are revenues you can measure for that, but for these individual kind of collectibles and pieces of art.
I think it's really all relative. I think like this was also like a big impetus for why I built CryptoArt.io. So you can track an artist's historical sale prices over time and see how they're trending, and you can also compare artists like directly to see like how their sale prices like compare to each other. So for example, you can have artists within a same category. Like say you have a bunch of artists that make oddly satisfying loops, and you can see like how many Instagram followers they have, and it's usually the prices are usually pretty correlated with like their social media following. So an artist that has 200,000 Instagram followers should in like it makes sense for them to sell stuff that's more expensive than another artist in the same genre but only has like 5,000 Instagram followers. So like that's probably one like benchmark for valuation that I kind of like to fall towards.
Got it. So kind of quantifying the popularity of these artists behind the NFTs.
Yeah, that's correct. And you can find a lot of alpha there because there will be artists that have like hundreds of thousands of followers, but are new to crypto and like don't have other like crypto artist friends to hype them up on Twitter. So a lot of people don't know about them, but they do have a big following in the traditional world.
Yeah, what is so interesting to me about crypto art is that a lot of these guys I haven't even heard of before, but then some small pockets of the crypto community are really, really passionate about them, and that to me usually is a sign that I should start paying a lot of attention. And that's part of the reason why we're having this conversation is because I haven't been able to understand it from an investment perspective. And I think another thing that really prompted a lot of thought was this recent blog post from Chris Dixon from A16Z, which I'm not sure if you've read, but
I have.
uh, so yeah, so for listeners, basically he talked about the main benefits of NFTs, and one of the main things is obviously getting rid of the intermediaries between artists and fans. But I was a little bit skeptical there because things like music and art, they're still so heavily reliant on curation, right? So all of my music, I listen to it on Spotify. I love these playlists they give me. So, and even in NFTs, we more or less have these centralized marketplaces to curate this art, right? So things like I think Sorare, Super Rare, and they still extract some sort of a fee. So how do you reconcile that kind of getting rid of the intermediary, but also needing some sort of curation and some sort of rent extraction in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I actually tweeted out like how do artists think about like which platforms to mint on, and like got like really thoughtful responses from several artists. Um, so I think curation is definitely needed in art. Um, you can think of these art platforms as museums or galleries, where like the value of like an artist's work on that like platform is dependent to an extent on like the value of the artworks around it. So like if you have a blue chip artist like Pac selling art on Super Rare, like its value, those like Pac's pieces would go down in value if it's surrounded by like a bunch of like rareable memes like that, like anyone could create. So that's why it's really important for these platforms to have like dedicated art platforms to have a curation team, an editorial team where they can like curate really good stuff. And like that's like really the success that Super Rare, Nifty Gateway, these like really big platforms had, is because like the curation is very top notch. But for like artists who are like just getting started, it does make sense to start on like a more open platform like OpenSea, where you can like make a like brand for yourself and build up a good social media following before you can like get accepted as an artist on like one of these more curated platforms.
And do you foresee the same challenges with, well, let me ask this another way. So I think a lot of the fascination with NFTs, at least for me personally, is this idea of connecting artists directly to fans. And I think that that's what attracts a lot of artists as well. But if we're still reliant on these distributors in the long term, that basically almost bastardizes the idea of NFTs into nothing but some sort of identity layer or some sort of ledger to keep track of who owns what. But you don't have that direct relationship between artists and fans, since they're still reliant on these kind of centralized marketplaces. Do you see that change over time? Are these centralized marketplaces just a transitory thing, or are they going to be here? And if so, like how would that be different from how traditional e-commerce is done, for instance?
Yeah, there's been several like really brand name artists that want to sell NFTs, but want to like own the entire like user experience. So like basically do the NFT sale on their own website with like a white label experience and like not deal with any intermediaries. Like Blau is probably the like only major one that I can think of that's like done it successfully. I think it is still pretty early for that, mainly because like the infrastructure isn't there yet. But like, I mean, in the meantime, I think like collectors like to go to a curated experience just because it's easy to like see what's going on, unless like you're already like a brand name artist in of itself, that like a collector can just go to your own like artist website, and then do the purchases there.
And are you seeing any, I guess, analogies for things like Uniswap? Because one of the things that I love about DeFi, and I think you probably share the same view here, is that things like Uniswap really remove the need for hiring a liquidity provider and paying a listing fee to go on an exchange in the first days. You can really just be your own liquidity provider, create liquidity from day one without giving up anything to any type of intermediary. And that to me is what's so powerful about crypto. Do you see similar analogies with the NFT collectible world right now? Is there like a Uniswap of NFTs?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I think like it's pretty hard because like these are non-fungible assets. So it's hard to create like, a single liquidity pool for this. Nftx like has like tried kind of bridging NFTs with DeFi, with like by creating these index funds. The thing with Nftx though is like when you want to withdraw from an index, you get a random NFT from that index. So there's no incentive to deposit like a high quality NFT in the index, because like the index just converges to like the lowest value NFT in that index.
And for the benefit of our listeners, can you explain what Nftx is?
Yeah, sure. It's a protocol that allows anyone to create index funds for NFTs. So you can have an index for example, like CryptoPunk zombies or CryptoKitties of like a certain breed. And it will be an index of say like 20 NFTs. And then the index has these LP tokens that can be traded on Uniswap and decentralized exchanges. And if you want to redeem an NFT in the index, then you just buy one of these LP tokens, redeem it, and you get a random NFT in that index.
Now, before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to share some exciting companies that made this podcast possible. With our sponsor, Crypto.com's mobile app, you can farm and trade DeFi coins such as DAI, Compound, YFI, and a lot more. What's more, if you provide liquidity, you can even boost your yield by up to 20x and harvest the daily yield in as little as 30 days. Their DeFi Earn feature also allows you to earn interest on your crypto with no minimum lockup period as well. So download the Crypto.com DeFi wallet app in the show notes below. God, and I'd love to kind of shift the focus a little bit on the actionable side of things as well, and talk about how you guys thought about investing, and what are some of the investments you guys made. But before that, I'd also love to get your thoughts or your spicy takes on this, because it's such a divisive topic. I think people in crypto are either really in love with NFTs, or they're super skeptical and they completely don't understand it. And I noticed recently on Twitter, you have guys like Vance from Framework, and I think Ryan from Masari, basically saying that they're seeing a lot of parallels between NFTs today and the 2017 ICO cycle, where you have anything that's an NFT basically gets re-rated, 5, 10x, and it's highly unsustainable. There's a lot of speculation. What are your thoughts on that? Are most of the NFTs really going to turn up like the ICOs of 2017? Are there some gems there, or do you think it's a completely different kind of paradigm here?
Oh, I think it definitely is like very reminiscent of ICOs. So
Hmm.
like they aren't wrong about that. Um, I mean, like if you've seen what's happening with like Nifty Gateway Open editions, where like there's so many people now like trying to flip. Same with like NBA Top Shots. I think NBA Top Shots is probably the craziest of all the projects, really, because like you have like random like lesser well known NBA players that like their like moments are selling for like tens of thousands of dollars. It's pretty crazy. But like like with ICOs, like most like 99% of this stuff like isn't going to be like valuable in the long term. But like the stuff that is going to be like massively valuable. So like if you look at the 2017 ICO, like the successful projects, like Synthetics, Polkadot, Cosmos, Aave, like those were like massive winners, like Chainlink as well. Um, and like I think that'll be the same with NFTs, where like the blue chip stuff that like matter for culture in the long term, like Beeple, Pak, and like the blue chip top shots, those are going to be valuable. Whereas kind of the random memes and like these short term speculative projects, like those probably won't be worth much in a couple of years.
Got it. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you there. And in terms of like actually investing in the NFTs today, because you mentioned that there's a little bit of a 2017 vibe where maybe valuations are a little high. But if I want to get started today, what are where do I even get started? Like, should I be investing in an index? And obviously, not financial advice, but should I be looking into these indices, or should I be trying to pick out what art I think other people will buy for a higher value in the future? How does one get started in NFT investing?
Yeah, I think my advice is to start with open editions on Nifty Gateway because those are really cheap and you can get Nifty Gateway does an amazing job at curation, so you can get exposure to like pretty quality artists. Um, and I think like when you're just like dipping your toes, it's important to like see a broad genre of like artists, like broad like variety of different artists, different genres, so you can like kind of really curate your taste because it always sucks that like you pick something that you think you like and then like later you realize that there's like something even better than that you should have bought instead. And like once you kind of like gotten your feet wet with open editions, then it makes sense to move on to like one of one editions, which those are always more expensive. And like Super Rare has the premium brand for one of ones because like they're supposed to be quote unquote super rare, and that's where like the single editions can like get really expensive for certain artists.
Got it. And you mentioned this thing about prices, and I actually wanted to touch on that because my impression, and I could be wrong on this, is that most of the investing in NFTs or purchasing of NFT art today is really relegated to maybe the elite within crypto, right? Where you have crypto rich people who can afford to spend $200,000 on a piece of crypto art. So I'm curious about what your take is there. Are there people outside of the crypto rich that are investing in NFT art that you've seen, or is this still very much a very kind of crypto native thing?
I think it's still pretty crypto native. Like just like with art investing, you got to be a whale. Like you got to have a lot of money to be able to buy art. So what I've seen is within for crypto art, it's a lot of ETH whales. Well, a lot of them are anonymous. Actually, most of the big name collectors are anonymous. That just
Hmm.
have a lot of ETH and are investing in art. It's kind of like a new generation of like millennials, I'd say, who are like really interested in internet native culture and art, versus like the boomers who still stick with like traditional Renoir paintings, things like that.
That, and I think another interesting observation here is actually I wanted to get your thoughts on, what do you think kicked off this recent wave in NFT speculation? Because for me last cycle in 2017 2018 we saw CryptoKitties started skyrocketing in prices, and that was typical of a late cycle behavior where you have a lot of people who made a ton of money in just speculating in altcoins and ICOs, and they diversified some of their wealth to these collectibles, and shortly after the market collapsed. Now, I don't want to jinx this market. I don't necessarily think it's the same situation, but what was the thing that suddenly kicked off all these kind of interest in NFTs?
Yeah, I think you started to have like really big name artists get into space. Like Beeple is probably the best case study, where he's like the biggest like biggest name artist in the NFT space, like by far. He has like over 2 million Instagram followers, and he did his first drop back in October when like not a lot of people were really like aware that he did a drop, and then like as more and more people like found out how big of a deal he was, and he started to get like mainstream like press coverage from like Reuters, New York Times, and also like the Christie's like announcement where like he's doing a sale on Christie's, which is one of the largest auction houses. Then that like really got people like kind of FOMOing in, because like the exist like the stuff right now is already marked up from like the early collectors who like realized like how big of a deal Beeple and like these other artists were, and then now like a lot of people are FOMOing in, because they see like how much of a return the early collectors got, and like they think that things can continue this way.
Yeah, and on that vein, I also want to understand some of the investments that you guys made because you mentioned earlier on that you invested in companies like Super Rare, OpenSea quite early on, and before these big artists started coming in. So, what was it that you saw in the opportunity before anyone was really talking about NFTs? And do you feel like your view has been vindicated, or is it still just playing out, or has any of the way that the whole NFT wave has played out surprised you?
Yeah, so I can go through OpenSea in 2018. So that was like literally when the term NFT was just like coined, and like we wanted to get exposure to that asset class. It's like pretty typical like seed investor mindset, and Devin and Alex were like by far the strongest team building something in NFTs, so it made sense to back them. That was back when like NFTs were only doing like a couple $1,000 in like monthly volume. Um, and then Super Rare, which was mid 2020. So I love like playing around with like Dune dashboards and doing queries on like projects and seeing their KPIs. And like this was like a huge source of alpha where like I saw that Super Rare was already like growing 55% month over month. Like this was like back when the number like the absolute numbers were small. So it didn't seem like much, but like if you compound 55% month over month, it was gonna like get pretty crazy. So it was like a no-brainer to like invest right at the inflection point, and like as you plot exponential growth, like now, February 2021, then that's when like the absolute number from that exponential growth like becomes like massive. So that was one where data was really helpful to make that investment decision.
And do you foresee these markets? I guess what is the target market size for some of these investments? Do you see them flipping traditional art auction houses, or is there something else?
Uh, that's a hard question to say. I mean, you can think with like non fungible assets is just like a massive market. I think it might even be bigger than like fungible assets like currency in like the traditional world. I don't know about that, but with art specifically, I just think of it as like a new medium, a new form of expression in art. How in art we had different forms like cubism, abstract expressionism, um, things like that. And I think crypto art is just the latest iteration of like a new style of art that like really appeals to millennials and like people who are internet native.
And as a follow up to that, I think one question that I had that I raised with your partner Nick, and we weren't really able to get a clear decision on yet, is whether investing in the picks and shovels, right? So things like OpenSea, Super Rare, So Rare, Rarible, all these marketplaces for people to sell NFTs, is a better strategy than picking a basket of, say, the most blue chip NFTs today. So if you had to pick one of these, which one would it be and why?
Yeah, I really don't have a good answer to this. I know, Nick compared it to like Coinbase versus Bitcoin,
Mm.
and I honestly think that's like the best analogy, where uh, you can invest in the picks and shovels like Coinbase, or you can invest in like the blue chip cryptocurrency in 2013, which was Bitcoin. So I think both will like return well. Um, I guess like when you're investing in the picks and shovels, as like a venture investor, like you really got to like pick the winner, which is hard, because there's a lot of companies that like won't return as well as Coinbase, and I think the same will be for a lot of these marketplaces platforms for NFTs, where it's like really like winner take all, duopoly take all. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
Got it. So it sounds like there is. I guess it's also a hard, I guess, an unfair question to ask because it's basically two fundamentally different types of investing. Where there's venture investing, you're trying to pick maybe the right company, the right Coinbase, and then the other is more like art investing, where you're trying to pick what piece of art will be popular in like 5, 10 years. So I totally understand where the difficulty is coming from. So I guess like another way to ask the question, right? If you were to own a basket of, say, the top DeFi tokens and a basket of the top NFT tokens with a venture outlook, say 3 to 5 years, how would you go about making the decision?
Like compared to what? Like me in terms of what?
Oh, so comparing a basket of DeFi tokens, the top DeFi tokens versus a basket of the top NFTs.
Oh, like which will
Which ones?
outperform?
Yeah, exactly.
I think NFTs. I mean, DeFi is like matured a lot in the last few months. Like DeFi was really undervalued, I think, until DeFi summer mid 2020, and then now, like all the blue chip DeFi coins are like $1 billion market caps. You have like a lot of new projects that just launched that will have like a fully diluted valuation of hundreds of millions. So I just think there's a lot more room for upside for NFTs. And I mean, if you look at the prices right now, so like
Mm.
Beeple, if you think Beeple is going to be the next Andy Warhol, then like a Beeple piece that's 5, 6 figures still has 100x upside. If you like kind of compare that to like what Andy Warhol pieces are selling for in the traditional auction houses. So yeah, I think based on where prices right now, the NFT blue chips have more upside than like DPI or like a DeFi blue chip.
That is really, really interesting because obviously I'm focusing almost all my time on DeFi and I see massive returns to the creation of financial institute, a completely new financial ecosystem. And I haven't really given a lot of thought to just how much these pieces of art can appreciate. So I guess in terms of the magnitude of returns, how do you reason about that? So how do you decide, okay, this piece of art could go to, this value, or, this target valuation, because with the DeFi token, I guess it's easy for me to make scenarios and assumptions about how much usage there is, how much fees is generated, and back out some sort of a value in the long term. Whereas if I look at, if I think this artist is going to be the next Andy Warhol, as you mentioned, what does it imply about the price of the art that I'll be investing in? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there isn't really you can't really do like a DCF on like NFTs. So valuation is like really all like relative. So you're kind of like looking at the market size and like artist upside, and like kind of comparing one artist to another and seeing like based on the comps, like will like one artist like kind of converge with another artist like over time. That's probably like the most like fundamental way to think about these.
Hmm, interesting. And I guess in terms of the next developments in NFTs that you're most excited about, what are the next big things for NFTs that you think people should keep an eye out for?
I think there's still a big world of like intellectual property, like IP, that can be brought on chain. So like NBA Top Shots is like really the first uh, to do it in like a major way. But then you also have like the other sports leagues, like the NFL, you have baseball, and also like with music. So I mean, for the music, it's still the jury's still out whether or not um, you'll need to partner with the record labels or like musicians can go the Blau route and like do be an indie musician and like sell your own NFTs and like bypass the labels. But I mean, regardless, there's still like a massive market of valuable IP that could be brought on chain and like turned into these NFT collectibles.
Got it. And this has been such an interesting discussion because I think prior to this, I was really skeptical about NFTs and investing in NFTs. And I think really through this discussion and through our private chats as well, I started to understand NFTs more as art investing, which is, fundamentally different from what I'm doing. But that is no way to kind of dismiss it or think that it won't be a profitable investment. And I'm almost, expecting to see actual art collectors come into this space and run these NFT funds. And I'd actually trust them to invest in NFTs more than I trust myself, even though I've been in crypto for longer. So I'm not sure if you're seeing the same type of talent flow into this space. Are you seeing folks from traditional art world start to enter the space or start to message you about these NFTs, or has it mostly still been kind of crypto native investors like ourselves?
I think we're like right at the cusp of like traditional art collectors like paying attention to these NFTs. But like for the most part, like the really savvy investors are crypto native and like they built their savviness around art investing just because like they've been doing it for like many years and like have seen like almost all the artists, like all the big name artists that have tokenized stuff on these platforms. So uh, you really kind of develop that judgment once you've just seen a lot of art.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a super fascinating discussion and really edifying for me. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And for people who want to keep up with the million things that you're doing, I know you've built a lot of amazing trackers and websites for different projects in DeFi and in crypto art as well. So for people who want to go to one place to follow all of those things you're working on, what would you say is the best place?
Oh, cryptoart.io is a great resource for tracking the crypto art space. It just like has data on like the most expensive artwork sold, which like the most expensive was for 6.6 million a week ago by Beeple. Um, and there's like latest artworks, an artist market cap. So this was like one another big reason I wanted to build the website is like just like how you have CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap for like cryptocurrencies. Like there really isn't like an artist market cap where you can see like all the artists like ranked by their total artwork value. So kind of how you can see in the real world how like Picasso is like number one, and then like it goes down from there. So like that was really cool to see, and all the data is like public on chain, and then you can see also like the KPIs and like monthly volume data for like different platforms like Super Rare, Nifty Gateway, and others. Um, and like I guess one last thing I like to say is, in the traditional art world, to like get such data, like you have to pay like $30,000 a year for like a subscription to like get access to this exclusive data, and it's very opaque. So like it's not like conclusive at it's not complete as well. But because stuff on the blockchain is public, and like everyone can see the transactions and like all the ETH payments that were sent, you can very easily find all this data publicly. So that's like one great benefit of like NFT art compared to traditional art is like all the data is public.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'll definitely link that in the show notes below so our listeners know where to check it out. Well, Richard, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for all that you do in the space, and thanks for educating me on NFTs.
For sure. Thanks, Jason. Glad that we're finally able to chat.
Yeah, absolutely.